In New York City, 1881, a man eludes another and pays extra to send a telegram via express. He receives a telegram from his uncle, John Carter, urging him to hurry and save him. Therefore, he travels to his uncle's estate, where a lawyer explains that John Carter died suddenly and left everything to the young man. He passes Edgar Rice Burroughs an old diary. John Carter is a decorated former captain in the Confederate Army who is prospecting for gold in Arizona after the Civil War. In the meantime, Colonel Powell of the cavalry tries to press Carter into service to fight the Apache. Later, Carter escapes Fort Grant on Colonel Powell's horse and meets up with a mounted Apache war band. Both sides are armed and wary, and a language barrier increases the tension. That's the reason Carter takes the chance to run off, but Colonel Powell is shot and Carter returns to retrieve the injured man. The two end up escaping into a box canyon and find a small cave. The Apache approach but quickly withdraw when they see something on the rock above the cave. Carter returns to where the Apache had been standing and notices a spider symbol on the rock face. He goes deeper into the cave and finds a chamber with strange markings, the walls and roof lined with gold. We see a strange bald man in a shining robe with a glowing knife that seems to have manifested out of thin air. Carter shoots the bald stranger and notices that he has retrieved a blue glowing medallion. He repeats the words he heard the other man say and suddenly he is teleported to and awakes in a strange desert. Carter tries to walk but stumbles and appears to float. He spends several minutes learning how to walk in this strange new environment. He ends up making his way to a nearby hill and finds a nest of eggs with hatchlings of green six-limbed infants. The adult aliens are mounted on large beasts and armed with firearms, and when they see Carter they open fire until one of them tells the others to stop. We see this tall green alien with 4 arms lay down his sword and rifle and greets Carter. As with the Apaches, there's a language barrier, but the two manage to give their names. The green man is Tars Tarkas, the Jedak, or leader, of his tribe. Later, Tarkas knows Carter is not a local and asks him to jump again. Carter takes the chance to jump towards Tarkas' weapons, but before he can fight he is overpowered. In a moment, Tarkas and his group collect the hatchlings and take Carter to their home in the ruins of an ancient city. Carter is horrified and out of his depth, but Tarkas has recovered the medallion and wears it. In the city, other Tharks treat Carter roughly and release him with the babies. Carter is given to Sola, a female who the other Tharks view with contempt, who pours a liquid into his mouth and he is soon able to speak and understand the local language. Later, somewhere further away, a battle between humanoids is happening. They fight on airships, one side blue and the other side red. On a red ship, 3 bald figures appear and approach General Sabdan. They give him a blue mesh device that gives him the ability to shoot bolts of energy, but when he tries to shoot the 3 figures, he is instead blasted backwards. Eventually, the 3 figures laugh. They are Therns, representatives of the goddess, and she has chosen to side with Prince Sabdan of Zodanga in this conflict. Later, the Thern leader, Matai Shong, gestures for him to test his new holy powers. The general sends bolts of energy to the enemy ships and wins the combat with ease. After that, Dejah Thoris is practicing a speech in the royal palace of Helium when her father Tardos Mors, the Jedak of Helium, arrives arguing with an entourage. Dejah demonstrates a machine that generates a weak blue ray, which she claims is the source of Zodanga's new power. However, one of the entourage, an undercover working for the enemy, zaps the device, making it fail. Tardos understands that this power could help level the battlefield, but they have no time to further their research. So, he dismisses the group and tells Dejah she has to marry Sab to end the conflict. Dejah is devastated as the wedding is unlikely to stop Zodangan expansion and she would no longer be able to continue her research. After some time, we saw Carter has a guardian, Wooler, who is a massive, wide-mouthed, low-to-the-ground creature who follows him like a dog. Meanwhile, Carter is disgruntled when he is trying to find Tars Tarkas to retrieve the medallion, but Wooler is able to catch up with him and disrupt a Thark party. Eventually, the angry Tharks beat Wooler and his owner, Sola, and Carter jumps in to stop the beating, unintentionally killing a Thark. Later, the Tharks see Carter as a new weapon, but are angry at Sola for allowing him to escape and brand her for her error. Carter watches in horror as the Tharks warn her that her next offense will lead to death. Then, the Tharks take cover when a sentry warns of a flying craft. 3 flying battleships appear in the sky, 2 red-flagged ones chasing a blue-flagged one. They close in for boarding parties and hand-to-hand combat. We see that Tarkas watches with a telescope and explains the war to Carter. The Zodangans are fighting the Heliumites. On the ship Dejah Thoris attempts to escape, then falls and hangs on but is several hundred feet up. Carter sees she is human and jumps to her rescue. With his ability to jump a long distance, he manages to rescue the girl and starts to defend her, only for her to prove her own fighting ability. But still, Carter is able to turn the tide of the battle, but the blue helium craft crashes. Somehow, Tars Tarkas makes Carter his Dota Sojat or right arms and gives him Dejah Thoris as a prize. Tars Tarkas' rival Tal Harjas, a warrior with a broken tusk, looks on in disapproval. In the meantime, Carter reluctantly agrees and soon finds himself fending off everyone's inquiries about his ability. Dejah wants to learn how to jump as Carter can, but it is likely related to Carter's different bone density. Tarkas warns Carter against her and Carter just wants to go home. He tries to describe his home to Dejah, but she thinks he is insane or a liar. She guesses that he is a Thurn, leading them to a discussion of astronomy and the realization that Carter is from Earth, or what is called Jasum to the people there. But he is currently on Mars, which is called Barsum. If there is indeed a way of traveling between the worlds, the Thurns will likely know the answer. Although Solar tries to stop them, Carter and Dejah Thoris enter a cave that is supposed to be a temple of the goddess and of the Thurns. After that, Dejah reads some ancient markings, but before they can proceed, the three are arrested by the Tharks for going into the temple. Then we see, Tarkas helps them all escape, at great personal risk, and Carter guesses Solar is his daughter. Considering that Thark custom is to hatch their young in isolation and rear them anonymously, there had to have been plenty of law-breaking involved. Later, Solar, Carter, and Dejah Thoris journey to the river called ISS to solve the temple mystery. Along the way, Solar warns Carter that Dejah Thoris is leading them astray and she admits they were headed for helium. Eventually, Carter convinces her to go to ISS first, as the river is a path for pilgrims who have sinned or lived too long. Solar almost joins them until Carter stops her. Later, Carter and Dejah Thoris enter an inverted pyramid structure and discover the ninth ray, a weapon used by the enemy. So, they also discover that Carter's appearance on Mars is likely due to the transmission of a copy of himself from Earth to Mars. However, Matai Shong is curious about the stranger who is getting involved with the wars and intends to test his ability. Carter and the two women mount up and scramble, but he stays back to fight the army with only Wooler to help him. Soon, he is eventually overcome, just as a helium battle cruiser arrives overhead. Sab then offers his sword to Dejah Thoris as a sign of trust and asks her to marry him. Then we see, Dejah Thoris almost kills him, but stops herself and takes Carter to Zodanga to be healed. Later, Carter awakes in a guarded room. At first he thinks he is in helium, but the red-clothed guards laugh. As he muses on being in enemy territory, a man dressed in blue appears and tells him he is in Zodanga. The man is Kantas Khan and he issues orders about putting Carter under higher security. Once close enough, he whispers to Carter to take him hostage, but Carter is too confused, and an exasperated Kantas pretends to be held hostage as he leads Carter away from the guards. Then, the two jump to a nearby tower. Inside, Dejah Thoris is dressed in wedding finery. After thanking Kantas for bringing Carter to her, she dismisses everyone in the room. Again she asks Carter to fight on her side. He refuses again, and finally she sees the wedding ring on his finger. Somehow, understanding that his heart belonged to another, but now knowing that the other woman is dead, Dejah Thoris tells him the magic words that will transport him back to Earth. Later, outside, Zodangan guards demand entry, but when the door opens, Carter has vanished. Dejah Thoris and the others leave, but the matron of the chamber returns to the room, then leaves again, and we see Carter is in a ceiling recess. He exits, and she uses a blue ray to immobilize him, then transforms into Matai Shong, the Thurn leader. Later, he forces Carter to come with him and explains how the Thurns are managing the end of Mars. Caught in a wedding procession traffic jam, Matai Shong changes into a Zodangan officer and leads Carter outside. Then Shong changes into an elderly woman as they watch Dejah Thoris being paraded down a street. We saw, almost lightly, Matai Shong tells Carter that after the marriage Dejah Thoris and anyone else who knows about the ninth ray will be killed. In the meantime, Carter escapes on a light flyer and crashes close to Solar. He returns to Tharkville and asks for help from the Tharks, who throw him in jail. However, he finds an imprisoned Tars Tarkas in chains and is furious when he learns that Carter brought Solar back. The prisoners are then taken to a large coliseum and made to fight giant white apes. Later we see, Carter kills one and challenges Tal Harjas for the role of Jedak, who beheads him with one neat stroke. Now the Jedak of the Tharks, he has an army willing to fight for him. After that, Carter leads the Tharks back to Zodanga to stop the wedding. On arrival, everyone has gone to Helium. Carter takes off in a light flyer and is spotted by Zodang and guards. As the wedding ceremony is about to finish, Carter crashes in. Matai Shong and his Blue Ray seem unstoppable, but a huge light cruiser crashes in and the Tharks join the Heliumite army. Later, Matai Shong escapes, but Carter recovers the medallion and Sab then is killed by the blue device he loved. With the immediate threat of Zodanga gone and now knowing where his heart is, Carter takes his wedding ring and asks Dija to marry him. So, she agrees and both Helium and Thark rejoice. That night Carter is restless and steps out of the room. He tosses the medallion into the canyon below. As he returns to the bedchamber, the guard thanks him and reaching out, grabs him and shifts into Matai Shong to send Carter back to the cave in Arizona. Meanwhile, Carter awakens stiff, dusty and bearded. The colonel is but a skeleton, and the gold and the Thurn body are gone. Later, Carter's narrative continues, as he realizes there must be other Thurns on Earth, and spends the next 10 years looking for another medallion. Eventually, he appears to find something in the Orkneys. He prepares a crypt on his estate so he can return to Mars and leave his body safe on Earth. In a moment, nephew Edgar is to be entrusted with keeping him safe because it is likely that the Thurns are going to attack his body, perhaps right at the moment when Edgar is reading the journal. At a point, horrified, Edgar runs to check the crypt, not knowing he is being followed. After a few tense seconds he figures out the password to enter and opens the door, but the crypt is empty. A Thurn appears behind Edgar, and is about to kill him, but is shot dead. Later, Edgar turns around to see Carter outside holding a gun. Carter explains he took a drug that made it appear that he was dead, and Edgar realizes he was simply bait to draw out a Thurn and enable Carter to obtain the medallion he needs to go back to Dija Thoris. However, Carter corrects him, saying that Edgar is indeed going to play a very important role, protector of Carter's body on Earth as he returns to his true home, on Mars. Then, taking the medallion from the dead Thurn, Carter goes into the crypt, lies down and recites the phrase to return to Barsoom. A word from John Carter, the Jeddak of Zodanga means to quash Helium this very night, and if Helium falls, so does Barsoom. We must throw out the thought of old hatreds. Tharks did not cause this, but by Issus, Tharks will end it. So, how was the movie? Do you like it? Then please like the video and also subscribe to the channel.